May 2025, a group of 19 members of the Swiss parliament, most of them from the Christian Democratic People's Party, which is worth noting, unexpectedly formed a so-called Committee to Support the Return of Armenians to Karabakh, branding their movement the Swiss Peace Initiative. This committee immediately established connections, which is also necessary to note, with the organization Christian Solidarity International. We deliberately emphasized the word Christian twice. The reason is that, following Donald Trump's victory in the presidential elections, the Armenian lobby tactically shifted its political arsenal and heavy artillery from the liberal camp, so popular during Joe Biden's presidency, to the conservative camp, in which the church plays a key role. Therefore, it is no coincidence that the Armenian lobby has recently been putting forward not the usual human rights and democracy issues, but the protection of the rights of specifically Christian Karabakh and the so-called Christian heritage of this region. In the same month of May, a conference was held in the Swiss capital, organized by the World Council of Churches and the Protestant Church of Switzerland, dedicated to the Christian heritage of Karabakh. Incidentally, Catholicos Garegin II spoke at this event. Just recently, from July 7th to 12th, members of the committee traveled to Washington, where a series of events and meetings were planned. Interestingly, former Armenian Foreign Minister Vartan Oskanian was spotted sitting at the head of the table, which is quite telling. Swiss MPs Eric Fontobel and Lucas Reimann, together with Vartan Oskanian and John Eibner, president of Christian Solidarity International, met with the deputy assistants to the U.S. Secretary of State, Jake McGee, and Monica Ager Jacobson, discussing with them the issue of the return of Armenians to the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. Finally, the last piece of the puzzle before we begin assembling it are the Armenian parties Handschlag, by the way founded in 1887 in the very same Switzerland, and Dashnaktsutun, founded in Tiflis, then still part of the Russian Empire. Now let's take a look at what we have given in this mathematical problem. So, given the organization Christian Solidarity International, the World Council of Churches, the Armenian Church led by Garegin II, the Dashnaktsutun and Handschlag parties, which hold strong positions in the Armenian diaspora, and figures from the era of Robert Kocharian such as Vartan Oskanian. If we set aside the usual anti-Azerbaijani rhetoric, which, as you understand, is absolutely unavoidable, an interesting observation emerges. The activities of this entire Swiss group, as well as their counterparts in Belgium and the Netherlands, are aimed not so much at the actual return of Armenians to Karabakh, about which even the committee members themselves harbor few illusions, but rather at consolidating the deeply divided Armenian society through the institution of the church and opposition parties, including those in the diaspora. And if you listen carefully to the speeches of these European MPs, one thing immediately stands out. The criticism is directed not only against Azerbaijan, but also against the current Armenian government. All these speeches resonate, in near unison, with what is broadcast on the screens of Russian federal TV channels. The Armenian Church has been and remains an instrument in the hands of the NKVD, the Soviet KGB, and now the Russian Special Services. Denying this is absolutely pointless. It is a well-known fact. Likewise, the Dashnaktsutun and Handschlag parties are rife with agents recruited by Russian intelligence. All the current fuss stirred up by Swiss, Dutch, Belgian, and to a lesser extent, French lobbyists, in alliance with traditionally pro-Russian Armenian political parties in the diaspora, and with the involvement of church institutions, is not aimed at achieving the obviously utopian goal of returning Armenians to Karabakh or protecting some so-called Christian monuments. Rather, it is aimed at criticizing the current Armenian government under the pretext of its attacks on the church, sabotaging the peace process between Baku and Yerevan and the format of direct negotiations between them, and ultimately bringing radicals and revanchists to power. And this, without any doubt, fully aligns with the Kremlin's agenda. It turns out that these groups of MPs have formed a situational alliance with those whose sentiments reflect the regulars of Russian talk shows and various evenings with Solovyov, despite their polar opposite positions on the Ukrainian issue. The hand of Russian intelligence services in these cells is obvious. However, it is important to note that their activities do not find support at the official level, that is, from the governments themselves. The foreign policy departments of Switzerland, the Netherlands and Belgium respond sharply to attempts by these so-called foreign agents, as they would be called in Russia, to influence the course of their countries. Governments are categorically opposed to the overthrow of Pashinyan. Even France, where about 600,000 Armenians live, most of whom support the anti-Pashinyan Dashnaktsutun, supports the current Armenian government. The Christian solidarity these figures are calling for is nothing more than a slogan, a smokescreen. They have been given a clear task: to create the necessary anti-Pashinyan background in Europe and undermine his approval ratings in the West. The goal is not the return of Armenians to Karabakh, but the derailment of the negotiation process. Ideally, of course, by toppling the current government, but at the very least through the mobilization of church institutions for this purpose. All of this is being coordinated from Lubyanka, the headquarters of the FSB in Moscow, and Yasenevo, the base of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR. And the methods haven't changed much over the decades. So let the law enforcement agencies of these countries investigate how it is that a Russian fifth column, or even outright FSB operatives, can operate so freely right under their noses.